I spent 30 years in advertising and marketing, and this is how I got into it and a bit about my story. I spent 30 years now in advertising and marketing, mostly as a strategy planner and researcher, looking at the way in which people react to things, what are the trends that are going on, how they interact with different media. I was actually a children's librarian in Sydney. For 10 years I worked in public libraries telling stories to little kids, and being a storyteller in public libraries doesn't pay much money. So I was looking for another job, and a friend of mine rang me up and said, hey, there's an ad in the paper that just said that an American company with 5 offices in Australia needed somebody to explain Australians to them. And so I rang up, and I didn't know anything about advertising. I didn't even know it was an advertising agency. And somehow I lucked into getting the job. And I've been lucky because when I started, there was no job profile. They didn't really know what they wanted me to do. I didn't really know what to do. All we knew was that they wanted to try and figure out, in that case, how Australians thought and how they reacted to different products. So I studied market research, strategy planning, fortunately got sent to get some training in the United States and England, and then came back and started doing that. And then after about 7 or 8 years, I got transferred to do that in Asia, and I spent the last 22 years living in different parts of Asia, doing exactly that for all sorts of big companies. And now I do it for myself. I think it's really important that you have a personal story, a little story about yourself that makes people sort of think about you, as well as the big stories about your qualifications, etc. But what's really important is the story that people would tell, okay? Not a story like, oh, I really want to get a job at your company because you do a great job. But what's the story you've got to tell that's going to be interesting about the industry, about the type of work that's involved. You need to show some passion about things. And it can be sometimes just by having a unique little story rather than, you know, I'm really qualified to do that, I'm really qualified to do that. I think sometimes that people get carried away with trying to impress by the big things without having a little personal stories to tell.